Hi you guys, welcome back. And of course, if you are new to this channel, welcome. My name is Tracy, and in this video, I'm going to tell you about the 1966 poltergeist, which is known as the Black Monk. So stay tuned. This poltergeist visitation story takes place across the pond at 30 East Drive in Pontefract, Yorkshire. This story takes place with a family named the Pritchard family. And this family consists of Jean and Joe, husband and wife, and their two children, Philip, who at the time was 15, and Diane, their daughter, who was 12 when this started. Now, also involved in this story, we have Jean's mother, whose name is Sarah Scholes, and she doesn't live too far away from them, but it turns out that she ends up spending quite a bit of time at the house as well. She spends her weekends there, and if they ever need her to stay and watch the place, she does that too. And then you have Joe's brother and his wife Enid, and they live next door. And then you have Jean's sister Marie and her husband Victor Kelly, and they live just a couple doors down. So all of these family members who live near them and who are involved are also going to be a part of this story. The poltergeist visitation began in August of 1966. The Pritchard family decided to take a little family vacation away from home, but their son Philip didn't want to go. He chose to stay behind. So therefore, his grandmother, Sarah Scholes, Mrs. Scholes, ended up coming over to 30 East Drive so that she could watch after Philip and the household while everyone else was away. And so, on a random Thursday in August of 1966, Philip was in the garden out back reading a book, and Mrs. Scholes, the grandmother, was inside in the living room, and she was just sitting and knitting. So, when Philip got up around 11:30 a.m., he went into the kitchen to put on a kettle of water. And at that time, he decided to go ask his grandmother if she would also like a cup of tea. As soon as he went over into the living room, he stopped dead in his tracks because there was a very fine white powdery substance falling, and it was actually covering the floor and everything in the room. And just as Philip came to the doorway of the living room and noticed, right about the same time, Mrs. Scholes looked up and she noticed what was happening as well. And the first thing out of her mouth was, "Philip, what are you doing?" And he said, "Nothing. What is this?" And so grandmother stood up, and that's when she noticed that the strange dust was actually falling from the middle of the room. So what I mean by that is that when she stood up, she was actually above the cloud of falling dust. And so it was kind of like half of the room was snowing dust. And so upon further examination, they both realized that it was falling from nowhere, but also seemingly replenishing itself because it wouldn't run out. It would just continually fall. Mrs. Scholes decides to call her other daughter, Marie Kelly, who lives just a few doors down. And so Marie came over to investigate the situation. By the time Marie Kelly showed up to the house, it was no longer actually snowing dust in the room anymore. At this point, the room was just simply covered in dust. Marie didn't actually see anything happen or see how the dust ended up there. So she was a little skeptical as to what they were saying was happening. And so, with her there, she decided, well, it does us no good to leave this dust everywhere, so let's clean it up. And so Marie goes off into the kitchen to grab the broom and the dustpan and things, and that's when she noticed a puddle of water right in the middle of the kitchen floor. Marie grabbed a towel and cleaned up that puddle of water. And just as she cleaned up that puddle, she noticed there was another puddle of water which had formed as well. And so she cleaned up that puddle. And as soon as she was done cleaning that puddle, there was another puddle. At this point, she was starting to wonder where this water is coming from. After cleaning that up, she even lifted the linoleum to see what was happening under the floor. And it turned out the cement floor underneath was bone dry. And so Enid, which is Joe's sister, remember, and she lives next door. So at this point, she came over and she had the idea to turn off the main water tap. And it didn't matter. The water continued to flow from an unknown source. And so they kept cleaning up the water until finally they called the water company and asked them to send someone out to take a look at the situation to see what was happening at 30 East Drive. When the service worker got there, he was baffled as well. And so he checked all of the taps, he checked all the drains, and as far as he could tell, everything was in perfect working order. And so he said he would report the situation, and he left. And as soon as he left, the water was done. There were no more puddles. After the strange dust and water events, the house seemed to quiet down, and there were really no other events that happened in the next couple of hours. Everybody went home, and everything was fine until dinner time. So after Philip and his grandmother were finished having dinner and they were cleaning up, that's when they heard a clicking sound. And so they both decided to go check it out and see what that sound was. It led them into the kitchen where they saw the tea dispenser button was being pushed over and over again, spilling tea all over the counter. And as soon as the tea ran out of the dispenser, the button pushing stopped. Now, at this point, Mrs. Scholes and Philip are both a little bit freaked out, but then they heard a crash coming from the hallway. When they walked over in that direction, a really loud click went off, and with that click, the hallway light turned on all by itself. And so Philip decided to step out into the hallway to see what the crashing sound was, and that is when he saw that a potted plant that is normally sitting at the bottom of the staircase was now in the middle of the stairs, and the pot itself was at the top of the stairs. Now, after seeing the plant in that condition, they're obviously very freaked out at this point. But then they started hearing another noise coming from the kitchen. They go back into the kitchen to see what was going on in there now, and that is when they saw a cabinet rocking back and forth as if some type of live animal was inside. And so Philip finally pulled the door open, only to find that the cabinet was completely empty, and it was no longer moving and shaking by the time he had opened it. They were so freaked out that they decided to leave and go on over to Marie Kelly's house and stay there instead. Well, Marie didn't quite believe them, so she wanted to go back to the house and investigate. So off they went back over to 30 East Drive so that Marie could see for herself what was really going on. She went straight to the cabinet that they were speaking about, and she investigated and found no wires or trickery or anything like that. And just as she was inspecting, it began to shake again. And of course, when she opened the cabinet, it stopped and there was nothing inside. After the cabinet incident, Marie Kelly decided to stay at the house just to make sure that nothing else happened that night. She ended up staying for a couple hours and nothing really happened, so Marie went home, leaving Philip and Mrs. Scholes once again. And so Philip decides that maybe he would go on upstairs into his room and go to bed. And just as Philip was getting all cozy in his bed, his wardrobe began to shake and dance across the room. This freaked him out, and back over to Marie Kelly's they both went. And at this point, Marie decided to call the police. And so they went back over to 30 East Drive once again, and this time the police came as well to check the place out, where, of course, they couldn't find anything either. Now, at this point, when this poltergeist had been bothering them all evening, it is now that Victor decides to tell them that they should call his friend O'Donnell, because O'Donnell is interested in ghosts and poltergeists, and he might actually kind of know more about what's going on here. And so Victor calls his friend O'Donnell, and he came on over to the house and sat there in the house waiting for a poltergeist experience. Now, O'Donnell again sat there for hours and nothing seemed to happen. He did fill the time while he was there explaining the difference between ghosts and poltergeists and simply just talking about the experience that they'd been having in the house. But yeah, nothing really went on. So as O'Donnell got up to leave, he stood up and he said, "Well, poltergeists do like to visit the same place twice, so it'll probably be back." And then he added that poltergeists love to rip photographs in half. Now, when O'Donnell said that, he knew that it wasn't really true. He was reading about different poltergeist visitation experiences, and that just happened to be an experience that he had recently read about. So he decided to just say it out loud and see what happens. And just as he got done speaking, they heard a loud crash. The crash was the sound of a picture frame falling off the mantle. So when O'Donnell picked it up and turned it over, it was a wedding picture of Joe and Jean, and inside the frame, the photo was ripped in half. That incident with O'Donnell actually kind of showed them that this poltergeist thing is listening somehow can know exactly what they're speaking about. Now, after the incident with the picture frame, the poltergeist was seemingly over with because there were no other incidents that took place for quite some time. But 2 years later, when August rolled around, the poltergeist visitation picked right back up again. Only this time, it seemed to focus more on Diane, because the entire family was in the house. And this time, the poltergeist visitation would last a long and grueling 9 months. During this long 9-month poltergeist visitation, they began to see a cycle that this poltergeist worked within. So usually, it never did much of anything during the day. And if anything did happen during the day, it was simply items might be moved to a different place when no one was looking, or that type of thing. Now, the poltergeist activity would actually pick up every night around dinner time, and it would not cease until around 1 a.m. And there were some nights where the bangs would become so loud, they would shake the entire house. The family just kind of grew familiar with what was going on and what was happening to them. And they even gave the poltergeist a name, and they called him Fred. And so sometimes Fred would even have a sense of humor with them. So Fred might hide a sandwich, and then when they go and find it, there's a giant, bite taken out of the sandwich, or something like that. But then there were also times where he can definitely hear you, because, for instance, Diane had a friend over one time who actually said out loud that she did not believe in poltergeists, and she didn't believe that Diane's house had a poltergeist. And just as she said that, the refrigerator door opened by itself, and a container of milk floated out, went straight over to that house guest, and dumped all over her. So the Fred poltergeist definitely seemed to have like its own sense of humor. But then there were times that it got downright scary for them. There was one time where Diane was actually pinned down under a table, and the table was pinned down so hard that both Philip and Jean tried to get it off of her, and it wouldn't budge. So finally, when Philip stood back and took a running start to tackle some invisible force that was choking his sister, all of a sudden, the force was gone, and they were all three in a pile on top of each other. That was so scary, in fact, that Diane ended up having even hand marks around her neck because of the unseen hands trying to choke her out. There was another time as well where Diane was being pulled towards the stairs by her clothing, and her parents could even see where the invisible hand was grabbing the front of her clothing and dragging her closer and closer to the stairs. About 5 months into this poltergeist haunting is when they had some neighbor friends over, and they ended up telling them a story about the land that their home the development was built on. And it turns out that the hill that East Drive is built on actually used to be gallows on top. And so many people were hung up there. Now, before it was gallows, even before that, it was a monastery, and there was a monk who lived there who was an evil monk. And he actually got in trouble and was guilty of raping and killing a local teenager as well. And so this monk is, they were telling him about this dark past that this monk had. And so then the family started to think, I wonder if that's Fred. And as soon as the story of the monk was given to the Pritchard family, all of a sudden, their poltergeist started to manifest as a black shadow figure that was cloaked, looking like a monk. And so therefore, Fred's name was changed to the Black Monk. But I found it quite interesting that both experiences of the picture ripping inside of the frame, as well as the presence of this black, shadowy monk, both instances were suggested before they actually happened. So what do you guys think about that? Let me know. But anyway, this black monk continued to terrorize, obviously for months longer, because, again, this poltergeist continued for 9 straight months. And then, finally, one day, Philip and Diane were sitting in the living room, just relaxing, when they both saw the black-robed, shadowy figure going down the hallway. And so, of course, they decided to go check out where he was going. They followed the black monk into the kitchen, where it stopped and seemed to be looking for something. And then the black monk turned towards them and sank down into the floor. And that was literally the end of this poltergeist visitation. It stopped literally just as quickly as it started. Now, in this story, as well as all of the other stories that we've been talking about, this Halloween spooktacular season is so interesting to me, but mostly because it kind of points out that these poltergeist phenomena are somewhat intelligent, but also it's just strange the way that they go in cycles and the way that they work and stuff. And I also wonder why the poltergeist activity stopped for those 2 years and then started up again, only to stop and never start again. So I'm kind of curious about that. What do you guys think about all of this? Let's have a discussion in the comment section down below. Well, that about wraps it up for this video. So if you like this video, be sure to click that like button. And of course, if you're a viewer but not yet a subscriber, I would love for you to click subscribe right under this video. And once you have subscribed, you can then click the bell and be notified each and every time that I upload a new video. Thank you guys so much for watching and spending your time with me. I love you. And I'll see you next time. Bye.